doing some background research. And this is going to get us prepared for creating a hypothesis and then setting up our experiment. So this is a very, very important step of the scientific method. Okay, so I have a couple of reflection questions for us up on the screen here, and I want you to go ahead and hit pause and kind of think about these questions in your head before we continue on. So I'll read these off real quick. What is background research? Why is background research important? What are some forms of background research? And what does ethical research look like? Okay, so go ahead, hit pause, think about these questions, and then hit resume when you're ready to chat. Okay, so what is background research? When I think about background research, it involves me looking at the information that's already out there and existing about my topic. So we've already identified our topic. We've identified the problem that we want to solve through our research experiment. So let's say that for me, I wanted to do a scientific experiment to figure out why kids in my classes fall asleep. Okay, hopefully you guys don't fall asleep in my classes, but if that were the case and I wanted to do a scientific experiment on that, I could do some background research and maybe interview or collect survey data from students in my classes to figure out what is causing them to fall asleep in my classes. Maybe I could go ahead and interview other teachers in the school or within Ag Teacher Network out in the state and our nation about some different teaching techniques that they utilize to help engage their students. So background research is just going out there and looking at information that already exists. So number 2, why is background research important? Kind of identified that in the previous question, but I'd go on and add to that by saying the next step of our scientific method process involves setting up a hypothesis, and after that we set up our experiment. So doing our background research and figuring out what information already exists can help us create a hypothesis to figure out what we think is going to happen, and also might give us some inspiration and ideas for how to maybe set up our experiment when that gets closer. Okay, so the next question, what are some forms of background research? And in class, we went ahead and we had a big whiteboard discussion about some different ways we can do research. And some of the things that we capture on that whiteboard each time I teach this course include interviewing. So we can go ahead and we can interview experts within the field about whatever our topic may be. We could go ahead and distribute a survey or collect data from people. There's a variety of different questions we can ask on our survey. They can be multiple choice, short answer, ranking questions. There's a lot of different varieties that we can utilize on a survey tool. Another form of data that we can use is going ahead and finding data sets, spreadsheets, graphs, charts, you name it, that already exist about our topic, and we can utilize those graphs and charts in our research to help draw some conclusions. If we're doing historical research, we can go ahead and we can look at archives or pictures or videos. These are all great sources. And obviously too, we can go ahead and we can Google search information, and obviously we want to make sure that our sources are reputable. Reputable basically means that they're professional and not fake. Right? So good rule of thumb, and I'm sure I'll share this several times throughout our presentation here today, is try to avoid websites that end in .com and instead go for .govs or .edu. Those types of websites are going to be the more reputable websites. .org is also another good form of website. .com basically means that they're trying to sell you something generally, so we try to avoid those websites in scholarly research. Okay. Now, which is the best and which is the worst? There really isn't any way to tell. They're all important. It's good to vary your sources when you do your research paper for the science experiment. I'm okay if you utilize a lot of internet sources because that's just, we're in 2020, 2021 school year. Like that's just the reality of where we're at right now. It's a lot of internet information. But if you can broaden and maybe go to the library and find a book or something like that, or an encyclopedia entry, that's great too. It diversifies what you have. Okay. Do you have to use the same forms all the time? No. It's good to vary your forms of background research whenever possible. Ethical research. Now, this is where it gets a little bit controversial. Everyone has a different opinion on what ethical research looks like and what it doesn't look like. For me, ethical research can be summed up simply as, are we keeping everybody safe? And are we portraying the data or information in the way that it was meant to be portrayed? And what that essentially means is we're not harming or giving away any important or valuable information in our research. We're not asking for people's social security numbers and then putting that on a spreadsheet for the whole world to see, and linking people's responses with specific information. That's important to avoid. Additionally, we don't want to potentially misportray or skew data or information that's shared in our sources. So we want to go ahead and give credit where credit is due and use quotation marks whenever possible. We also want to make sure that when we are paraphrasing or utilizing the ideas from somebody else and making them our own, that we are not changing things up. And we will talk about some more specific examples of that as we get closer to the science fair deadline. But for now, just make sure that you know that you're being truthful and honest, giving credit where credit is due, and not harming individuals through our research or through our background research. Okay. So what is bias? We talk a little bit about bias in class too, but bias is essentially having a specific angle or opinion before we research. And we all have opinions. That's inevitable, but it's important to kind of leave that at the door when we're putting our research brains on. Okay. So for me, it probably would be kind of challenging for me to write an unbiased report about the value of FFA because I am an FFA advisor. I'm an agriculture teacher, right? But if I'm writing a research paper about llamas and I don't own any llamas, I'm not going to have as much bias on that topic, right? We all have biases. Our job is to recognize them and not let them get in the way. And we also have to avoid bias sources during our research. So we're going to go ahead and look at some examples of that on our case study. If we were in class, we would be doing this as a group, but we'll kind of talk through it together here. So you're writing a news release about FFA and the future of ag education. Identify 3 potentially biased sources, and identify 3 safe sources that are not likely to be biased. Be ready to share out what you came up with. So a couple of examples, go ahead and pause real quick. But a couple examples for bias sources again, me, an ag teacher. I mean, I think that I consider myself to be quote unquote like kind of a semi-expert on talking about FFA stuff. It might be good to interview me, but I obviously have a bias and a love for FFA and agriculture education. So another bias source could maybe be a website that is anti-agriculture, anti-FFA organization. There are some that exist out there, unfortunately, but that could be a potentially biased source on the other end of things. Some safe sources, however, could potentially be the National FFA website because that has factual information about the organization. Another safe source could potentially be, let's say, other teachers in the building, right? That have some experience with FFA, or maybe parents of FFA members, right? So people who have experience but aren't quote unquote living the blue jacket or living the FFA experience day in and day out might be able to provide specific sources or opinions about the future of agriculture education and FFA. Okay, so that is an overview of background research. Go ahead and head to your case study and work ahead on stage number 2. Be sure to circle the appropriate responses and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.